About 15 soldiers and 3 civilians were reportedly killed by terrorists in a fresh attack on a military camp at a place called Pollwaya in Birnin Gwari local government area in Kaduna State in northwest Nigeria. The terrorists were said to be traveling from Niger State to Zamfara State in large numbers via Birnin Gwari, reportedly launched a deadly attack on the military camp. News sources say the terrorists overpowered the soldiers due to their large numbers. The terrorists were also said to have burnt military armoured tanks at the camp. Birnin Gwari shares a border with the states of Zamfara and Niger, which are among the hotspots of armed gangs. Joining us now to discuss the recent terror attack in Birnin Gwari, Kaduna State, is Onyekachi Adekoya, Managing Director of PR24 Nigeria and a Fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Industrial Security. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Tundun was just talking about that attack on the military formation in Birnin Gwari local government of Kaduna State. Meanwhile, the security chiefs are saying that the solution that they've come up with is to continue to review the country's security architecture. I was shocked that one newspaper this morning was using that same, old phrase, security architecture. What else is it that they have not reviewed about this security architecture that they still plan to review? And what do you think the problem is really? Because we just hear the same standard response, either from the president or from the service chiefs. Security architecture. I don't know whether they can find another name.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Abati, sorry, good morning, and thank you for having me. Sadly, it's a sing-song now when we use the word security architecture. I think it goes beyond the architecture. We are not running a decisive national security program. And for you to run a decisive national security program, you have to have an operating doctrine to this national security program. So, as it were, I'm not sure what a national security doctrine is. If we have any, it is at best rather chaotic because your program has to take into cognizance your context, both geopolitical, religious, international, regional context, and then understanding what your set constraints are, and you must clearly define what your objectives are. I know that we have in the 2019 National Security Strategy, the government had highlighted that it wants to pivot off what we call human security as a doctrine. But we can't see that. There's no synergy between the different forces that we have. And if there is, then the results we are getting will suggest that that synergy or structure, as it were, is rather failing, and it's failing very fast. So I think we need to dial back a bit on the political speak and, come back to local issues, understanding local context, and developing a local-based approach to addressing these issues of insecurity. We've gone rather too philosophical or too entrenched in some parochial sentiments, assuming that the military is always the answer to every issue of insecurity in Nigeria. The military cannot solve issues of insurgency. It has never worked. Issues of terrorism, domestic terrorism, cannot be solved by the military. We have a counter-terrorism unit of the Nigerian police force. And because of the domestic nature of it, which is the emphasis and the nuance that we are missing by our current setup, we would never be able to completely address this issue using pure military kinetic force. And I think that's what is missing a bit.
Thank you for that. What else is missing? Do you believe that there's actually sincerity of purpose in addressing this situation? Because it has been posited that there isn't, which is why it persists, and now it's even escalating.
I think the use of sincerity of purpose is also vague. If you are sincerely wrong, you are sincerely wrong. If you are sincerely ignorant, then you are sincerely ignorant. A man cannot give what he does not have. So I think this is a clear case of competence and capacity. okay? The intention is there. You can't blame the military for lack of effort. They are the ones losing men every day. These are people's fathers, people's children that would never come home, who have died in the defense of fatherland. The military is trained not to die, but to train to fight to win and to fight to defend fatherland. But it looks as though our forces are being pushed out to daily slaughter. The police, the military, it was the FRSC the other day in the southeast. So this has become a bit of a recurring decimal. The issues are not letting up, because it's a structural challenge that we have.
Do you think that the war economy is fueling all of this? And I talk about the war economy in the sense of sponsors. We've been having this talk about sponsors of terrorism. Nobody has been brought to book. I'm talking about the war economy in terms of villagers that act as intelligence officers to the terrorists. They don't work in isolation. I'm talking about the war economy in terms of women that have become prostitutes and sex workers for these terrorists. There's a war economy and an ecosystem going on that nobody talks about. What's your take on that?
Rufai, that's a very simple, I think, analogy to the problem that we have. I do agree with you that there is an entrenched supply chain and a value system around what we are currently seeing. And they are not terrorists, though we have classified them terrorists so that we can hit them very hard and not come under scrutiny of the International Criminal Court. What we have are armed criminal groups that are running a business. The economic interest, which is very strong, which is what you are alluding to, is what drives it. And yes, there is a complete value chain. There are those who supply them weapons, supply them drugs, supply them medicines, supply them services, repair their machines, repair their generators, supply them phones and SIM cards. You will be amazed. They also have, that's why I said it is domestic in nature. And they also have their own local intelligence network. So that's the one hand. But there's the elephant in the room, which you don't talk about, is the interest of certain geopolitical groups, and I don't want to be too specific for very good reasons, that are also a destabilizing force in the Sahel region. And these persons or groups or interests, as it were, are also fueling the crisis. Because you cannot say that we are fighting a ragtag army and they have sophisticated weapons, they are supplied with military tactics and intelligence, they have protected routes through which they travel, they have some kind of cover which is transnational in nature and which will seem to me like a covert operation from Eritrea to Ethiopia, okay, and acting as a destabilizing force in Africa. So that's why I said you can simplistically say that there is a war economy in Nigeria. But beyond the war economy and the value chain or supply chain to this whole madness that we see, which is almost like a controlled chaos, as it were, there are other interests that are at play. And what is at stake is all the elements with which Nigeria can project national power and project its own national interest, what we call generally the midlife, okay? Elements around the military, elements around intelligence, elements around our diplomacy. Diplomacy, though we control and should be able to control. And maybe if I have the time, I'll talk about what we should be doing with this Russia-Ukraine crisis. Elements around them information and the flow of information around us is no reason why you saw the spark between the government and Twitter, okay? Elements around the law, okay, and our criminal justice system and what our legal framework to address some of these issues are. So there are a number of things that are challenging us that, are also challenging our macroeconomic outlook. So Nigeria is under, as it were, some level of asymmetric attack, both locally and being driven by some other interest. So it is not a time for gross incompetence at all. It's a time for clear leadership. It's a time for level heads to understand what is at play and then how we play our own international politics to be able to confront some of these domestic issues, which are, as it were, we don't have the capacity. And the reason why we also don't have the capacity is that certain parties have refused to supply us with lethal weapons that we dearly need. We've even paid for some and they have not been supplied. So it's a hydra-headed challenge. It's too simple to say a war economy is driving it. There are other things that goes beyond the war economy.
Okay, quickly, just before we wrap up. Some people have expressed concern that with the way the terrorists have become very bold these days, they even take on military barracks, the defense academy, they don't respect anybody anymore. Some people say this may affect the 2023 elections. And is it possible that there are certain fifth columnists who do not want the 2023 elections to hold? Do you think that that conspiracy theory has any merit?
Yeah, Dr. Abati, in risk anticipation analysis, we play all sorts of scenarios. And we've seen this in recent past. America had projected the breakup of Nigeria in sometime 2014. And cyclically and empirically too, pre-election violence would seem to spike very considerably on the eve of a major election cycle as we have in 2023. The fear in our own analysis is that we have not seen the worst of this crisis because the crisis in the Northwest has not peaked. The one in the Northeast has peaked. The one in the Southeast is a bit shaky. We're not sure where this will go. So you can't rule out the fact that there are other permutations and machinations out there. And that's why I said we are in a dire straits where clear, cool heads, calm minds, and leadership is needed to help us navigate this precarious situation we find ourselves in. Because in all the regions in the country, every region is challenged. And of course, if you don't have security, you can't have elections. And that could be the excuse for some other sinister objectives, which we also don't want to give oxygen to on national TV. So these are very, very interesting times, and leadership is needed. We cannot afford the lack of leadership which we have seen for some recent time. Leadership is needed, and the CEC just has to do what he has to do to provide that leadership and direction and bring this under quick control.
Well, thank you very much, Onyekachi, for joining us on the morning show. Thank you very much indeed.